Ooh, recording.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Everyone, jump on into the chat area and say hello. We'd love to make sure all your keyboards are working, that you can hear us. We'd love to hear where you're calling in from. Myself, I'm here in Brighton, UK, right on the south coast of the UK, and we're joined by Tami from Miami.
Who's actually in Miami today?
There we go.
It's not
Where's
always that I'm in Miami, so it's you're coming from the home field.
perfect?
Also, I
Excellent.
wish that the note takers could be like, I was built in this.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, note taker, note taker, note.
Yeah, lots of chat from the note takers these days. I think that's the way. But we have some real humans here too, as well. Hey, Jim from Charleston. We've got Joseph from Brighton as well. Hello.
Ooh,
Jason from Nashville. So I can see people coming in. This is great. Thank you.
him.
Yeah, good to see folks. We've got people from all over the place, and I know a lot more are just settling in now. So, hello, everybody. Welcome. If you've just joined us, we're just settling in. Find your way over to the chat and say hi. So let us know where you're calling in from. If you want to, drop your LinkedIn and connect with fellow product people here. Let us know what you're hoping to get out of this session, what made you sign up, and find your way over to the Q&A section as well. If you have any burning questions already, then drop them in. If you have questions as we go, drop them in there. People will have the chance to see questions and vote them up. So we're going to be able to see which are the most popular questions and make sure we try to get to all of them today. But as we do with these webinars, it's always just an open, flowing conversation. So we'll see where the hour takes us. So we're going to kick off in just a minute. I can see people are just still settling in and jumping in and figuring out the chat and whatnot. And then we're going to kick off in just a second. Get our last chance for a sip of water before we jump into a chat.
Such a smart idea.
Yeah, exactly.
This is my color changing cup. It's cold and turns orange, and then
Okay, now I want one of those.
Amazon.
That's great.
It's
All right,
like
yeah, it could be mine.
it actually comes as a
by
pack of a
10
whole
by
variety of
10 p.m.
colors.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. So we're going to kick off now. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome. Come on in. This is a ProdPad expert fireside series that we run here at ProdPad. We've been running them for years, and they've been going back for a long time. Every month, we've been running different versions of this, always with a focus on the expertise that we bring in. So every time we bring in an expert to share their learning, their insights, their rants, whatever they've got for us, right? And it's always with a focus on that learning and that sharing. Today is going to be recorded, so you'll get a copy of this afterwards. You will be able to share it around with your colleagues. We do have a chat that you can use. We also have, very crucially, a Q&A section. So if you've got questions, drop it into the Q&A, and that way they can float to the top and we can find them. Look forward to hearing your questions. Feel free to drop them in now or later. We'll try to get to them as we go through, but otherwise we'll just jump in and have a chat. And today we are chatting about how to stop defending your roadmap and how to start building influence. We're joined by Tami Reiss here. A lot of you might know Tami as Tami from Miami. She's a leadership coach and a speaker who spent over 20 years coaching executives and scaling high performance teams at companies like JP Morgan, Humana, and Insight Partners, where she was a CPO in residence. She's the person that leaders go to when they want to lead with more confidence and clarity. And her whole philosophy is about influence over authority, how you build momentum for your ideas without needing the formal power to force them. And so today we're talking about how to stop defending your roadmap and how to start building influence. So everyone say a big welcome to Tami. Tami, thanks so much for joining us. Really good to have you here.
I am so glad to be here, and I really liked your phrasing of influence over authority as opposed to influence without authority.
Yeah. And why does that speak to you?
Because a lot of people think once they have authority, they're not going to need the influence muscle anymore, when in fact
Mm.
it's the reverse. One of the things that inspired me to do more public speaking about influence was that in my executive coaching practice, so many executives that I was working with, I was simply reminding them to use their influence muscle. That when it came to their peers, when it came to their CEO boss, when it came to the board, they had no authority there. So that they sometimes remembered to use influence, but they would forget to do it with their team. If you're
Oh,
trying to
interesting.
implement a change with your team, if you're trying to change behavior on your team, surely you can use your authority, but it works better if you use influence.
Oh, interesting. Is there like a point in time when they realize this, or is this something that they stumble on?
They needed it explicitly explained.
Okay, all right. I mean, how would somebody know if they're like tripping over that particular piece?
I think if you're instructing more than asking questions, that's always a bad sign. right? Like
Yeah,
statements
yeah.
instead of questions. Like if you're having a one-on-one with somebody and you say, I've seen this and you need to change this and blah, 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 as
Mm,
opposed to asking them questions. Why did this happen? What do you think you could do about it? How can I support you in doing something better? All of those things are questions versus answers. That's my first red flag in general. And beyond that, have you invested the time to think about the other side, which we'll get into more in our conversation, I'm sure.
yeah, absolutely. I want to dive more into
If
that.
it's all about you, something's wrong.
That's yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing that product people work that influence muscle enough to get themselves into a position of authority, but then regress back to not using it in the right ways, which could be really interesting to look at. It's like who's affected by it.
Yeah. And beyond that, we're really good at knowing how to influence a designer and influence some developers and maybe influence the sales team or the customer success team or the marketing team. But we haven't thought about what does that process actually look like? Our brain does it. We know enough about developers. We know enough about designers. We have enough spidey sense of sorts.
Mm.
But if I ask a product manager to tell me how it is that they influence in a generic way, what's the repeatable process? Very few would be able to tell me.
Oh,
And very few of their managers would be able to tell new product people how to do it.
see.
Way.
That's actually really interesting to think about influencing as a repeatable process.
It's a skill.
Yeah. And oftentimes I think about it in terms of something that you just tackle in that one situation, that one conversation, and you don't even do it intentionally or mindfully. I think a lot of people, may or may not be using that muscle, may or may not be using the tactics, but probably don't have a repeatable process where they go, this is how I'm
Yeah.
going to get from here to here.
And especially because we're talking about roadmaps, people have the impression that they need to really use their influence skills to get buy-in on their roadmap
Mm,
during that snapshot of time when they're annually getting buy-in on their roadmap. And they forget that there's the 320 other days of the year where
hmm.
you could be building influence, you could be building trust and confidence, which makes selling your roadmap more of a sale versus a defense.
Yeah. And so the roadmap is always such a contentious subject, right? It's where everything gets really heated around where it came from and who influenced it and who has authority over it and that sort of thing. Why is that? Why does it all come to head at the roadmap?
I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a roadmap means. To
Mm.
me, it's a communication device. I've said that for years. And what it communicates and how it communicates comes back to the way we communicate in general about a lot of things. But it's a physical artifact that is a snapshot in time of your best guess of what you are going to try and fix in the coming, whether that's quarter, half year, or even beyond, right? And because there is this confusion that a roadmap is a contract of our to-do list,
Yeah.
we get caught up in either explaining that it's not, or managing expectations that it's not, or not putting very much into it because we're afraid of it being a contract. And then we're looking like we're not planning enough and we're not doing enough. And then we try to put the vantage point that we're doing enough, but then we've agreed to too much. And now we have this contract. It's a big cycle that goes nowhere positive. And most of the time, in around 90 days, the entire thing gets blown up.
Oh God, you're absolutely right. And actually, I bet there's people in the audience right now are listening into this going, "Oh my God, I'm seeing this in my place." If that's you, drop your own anecdotes of what you're seeing related to the
Yeah.
roadmap and the heat around it in the chat, and we'll have a little peruse over some of those stories.
You can't think about a story because you feel like that's too much. Tell us. It's about to be September 1st, right? So
Mhm.
we're two-thirds of the way through the year. Tell us what percentage of your roadmap that launched, let's say in January 1st, has been completed, and what
Oh,
percentage you think will be completed by December 31st. Either or. Tell
yeah.
me if the number is higher than 15 or 73 or whatever. What in your mind do you think it is? If you had to go back and say, did we do this? Did we do this? Did we solve this problem, etc.?
And don't worry, folks, whatever you've put, we've probably seen worse. Honestly, I've seen a roadmap annihilated in minutes, right? As soon as it
Minutes.
leaves the room. And so the roadmap, you're right, it's a communication document, but it's also a tool, it's part of the process to get that alignment. But product managers often end up just defending their roadmap as
Yeah.
opposed to like, why is that? Why did product managers get defensive over, frankly, something that is filled with stuff that wasn't necessarily their idea in the first place?
Agree with that. I think that we're trying to solve too many problems with one individual tool.
Mm.
So when I created my roadmap course for Product-Led Alliance, there were actually three different types of roadmaps we use because there's three big different audiences that roadmaps serve. So the first one is the detailed, these are the sprints roadmap. It should not be really looking more than 6 weeks out. And it's for your dev team and it's for the designers. So they make sure they have all your mock-ups. And it's the real stuff that is on the truck.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you have your roadmap, which is either 2 quarters out, maybe even a full year out, which talks about more problem-centric stuff. It looks closer to a strategic roadmap, but it's not really. This is the roadmap most people think about when they think roadmap, and it has the nice names of initiatives or the customer group, and they might be color-coded by a variety of different things. And it doesn't include the nitty-gritty of things. It
Hmm.
more often than not needs to be very different than the sprint E1 because it needs to talk about a launch date versus the build period. And if you put the build period, people are very confused. And then we have a third type, which is a strategic roadmap, which looks
Hmm.
18 months to 5 years out, really 3 years in this point. And it says, here are the big building blocks we want to be thinking about, which get us closer to our vision and our mission as a company. And that audience is the board and the executive team. And the in between one is sales and customer success and all of your internal, what are called stakeholders. I call them partners, and your external partners. All of those people's are audiences. And in reality, they might need to see different variations of that. They
Yeah.
may need to see it flipped on its side, where it's not by quarter, it's by product, or it's by product, or by user group, or by. And if you think that you can create one roadmap that solves all of the needs of all the different audiences, you're wrong. We all know a
Hmm.
product for everyone is a product for no one. I often say a pitch for everyone is a pitch for no one. A roadmap for everyone is a roadmap for no one. If you think you can build the roadmap to end all roadmaps, good luck, right? And that's part of why technology, like,
Hmm.
because you can show different vantage points, different views to different people in a much more systematic and much faster way than sitting there like dragging and dropping. Do we
Yeah.
remember Vista?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like about storytelling, right? And whether you're talking about that at the much more granular level or you're talking about that about the big picture, each section needs, each vantage point needs a different story
Yeah.
to embed it and to get people going, okay, yes, I see how this works, but also now they want to get in their take on it. And they can only get their take in on it if they understand the story, if they
Yeah.
understand what you're trying to communicate to them.
And that to me is actually 3 steps later, which is
Mm,
you've actually captivated them enough to tell them a story.
yeah.
Getting people's attention is so hard. There is
Yeah.
so many things competing for people's attention. And if you think your roadmap, when you're not on someone's team and you aren't seeing whatever their dashboards are and what their boss is messaging them on Slack and what their employees are complaining about right now, like never mind what's going on in their personal life, right? Captivating anybody, getting their attention is incredibly hard. And so in order to even get to the point where they listen to the story, which you've customized for them, hopefully, and
Hmm.
not for everyone, per we were just talking about, is hard enough. And we need to even think about what is our hook to a certain degree that's going to
Ooh,
captivate them? What are
yeah.
we going to say in the opening of our story that encourages them to listen? Like,
Yeah.
I talk about the journey for influence, and captivate's actually step two. We'll talk about step one in a second. But before you can get to resonate, motivate, and activate, which is when someone does something, the thing you want, which is to agree to your roadmap, right? To tell their staff about what's coming and why they should be excited about it,
Yeah.
all that stuff. That's like step number five, right? So before that, they need to be motivated. That's their emotional attachment. Before that, it needs to be resonated. Their brain needs to see why this is a logical thing that's going to help them. Captivated is to get their attention. And we only
Ooh,
get their
yeah.
attention by saying something about something that's important to them. And
Yeah.
that brings us to the first step, which is cultivate.
Okay,
We
talk to me about
have
that
to,
first step.
we have to cultivate relationships with people. We have to get to know them. We can't say something that's going to be attractive to them unless we know them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was about to ask you tips on how to captivate, let's say your exec group or whatnot, right? How do you find out what's important to them? But that is about understanding
Yeah,
what their goals are, what's keeping them up at night. I've al-
100%.
I've often said that product managers can work with customers till the cows come home, right? They understand customer delight and they understand doing discovery on customers and asking all the questions, right? We worked for years to hone this skill. And then it's like, okay, what do these stakeholders need? What do my executive stakeholders need?
It's exactly the same skill.
You can ask them the same, not the same questions, but use the same skills, that discovery stuff to pull that insight out of them.
Yeah. And so what I've had to do with like executive coaching is explain to the executives I work with, your team members, they're your customers to a certain degree. If you're
Hmm.
trying to implement a change or get them to do something different or new or adopt a new technology or avoid a new technology, avoid a risky behavior, whatever those things are, you have to do some customer research.
Yeah.
And that goes for peers and that goes for anything and everything in between. That muscle we have that we've had to develop as product people is universally applicable. We
Yeah.
simply need to put on the mindset of, oh, this is customer development again. They're my customer now. I was actually a few years ago, my children were in preschool, and the preschool director had what I said was like the most classic B2B problem, which was the children were his users, but the parents were his customers. And
Ah,
he
yeah.
didn't know how to talk to the customer. He only knew how to talk to the user. And the users were delighted,
Yeah.
but the customers were incredibly frustrated. And I
Yeah.
was like, you need to do some customer development and customer messaging.
That's a really good way of, so if you're talking to your execs, are they the toddlers in this metaphor or?
But the exec is the executive director. That's who I'm
Yeah.
talking to. The
Yeah.
toddlers are often their employees
Yeah.
or the employees of their team members. And you might have to do user and customer development research.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember my first ever coaching client, and I don't actually do
Mm,
very much coaching anymore. I do much more teaching about influence because I want to help a much more broad audience. But one of
love
my
that.
first coaching clients is a woman named Jennifer Sherman. She's actually now based in the UK with a company
Hmm.
there. And she's now COO or CPTO. I forget how many C's she's had since we worked together. But she was thinking, she said to me, and she doesn't mind me telling this story because it's such a great, she goes, Tammy, I don't know if I give good board deck. I was like, what a great way to phrase it. Like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
get good word deck. I said, there is a group of people who can tell you. And she said, who? And I said, your board. And I said, why don't you talk to two members of your board and ask them how you're doing? And you know what they do? They sit on multiple boards. Ask them what other product leaders are presenting to them that you could possibly incorporate. Ask them where you're going overboard. Ask
Yeah.
them what you could provide that no one else has provided that they wish they got because they're your customers.
Yeah. It's almost like this practice of learning, iterating, adjusting based on what we're seeing can be applied to our processes, can be
Everything.
applied to how we're working as leaders.
Or your roadmap. If you think whatever your template for roadmap is that you've been using for the last 2 years is sufficient and you haven't checked with some of your partners to find out, is it delivering what they need? If you haven't iterated on it, that's also a red flag. So it
Yeah.
just says to me, you haven't been trying to make it better. You haven't tried to make it a better communication device. And whether that's the color coding or the grouping or the timeline or whatever it is,
Yeah.
that someone else needs, find out
Yep.
because you're serving someone else with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we
I've
love to serve customers and users well.
Yeah, I've said something similar because people, I see thousands of roadmaps, right? And people often share their roadmap with me and go, "Oh, I'm not sure if this is the right thing, or it doesn't look like my roadmap from before, it doesn't look like this other company's roadmap. Is this a roadmap? Is this an okay roadmap?" I'm like, I can't be the one to tell you that, right? I can judge my first impressions from the outside, but I'm not the one who's your user here, right? So here's how you're going to figure out. But actually, you know what? Your roadmap shouldn't look like your roadmap from last year. It shouldn't be the same as somebody else's roadmap that you downloaded from whatever. It should be something that communicates where you are and where you're going to your specific user base, to your customer, to
And
your exec team.
per what we were talking about earlier, it's probably not only one road. You
Mm,
probably have to create
yeah.
6 versions of it.
Yep.
And know that in advance. Know that going in, that
Hmm.
you want to create 6 versions of that. That's not a sign of failure.
But that
That's a
sounds,
sign of strength.
yeah. Now, Tammy, that sounds like a lot of work creating all these roadmaps, and there's got to be some benefit behind creating these roadmaps, not just to have roadmaps because everyone needs a special version, right?
Yeah.
What are you actually getting out of it when you're creating these roadmaps?
So to me, it's a matter of are you front loading your time or back loading your time?
Ooh,
So you could create a single roadmap, put everything in there, and then
mhm,
you're going to spend hours and hours helping people navigate it, helping people find what they want, answering questions about why one thing is over here, blah, blah, blah. Or you could invest that time earlier to better understand what someone is looking for and
mhm,
say, here it is,
yeah,
have either a conversation with them in advance of it becoming finalized as a feedback loop, what
yeah,
adjustments you need to make in advance, or when they're signing off, yes, this looks good, right? So one of those two things, but rather than spending hours and hours on the back end having the same conversation over and over again in circles, you're doing it earlier on. It's
yeah.
potentially the same amount of time, but it's also potentially less time.
And you're going to get a better result from it, right? So this is how it's analogous to prototyping, right? So we're all familiar with the process of prototyping. So putting something on a piece of paper or on a mock-up tool or something like that and getting a really simple version with crayon lines and Comic Sans and showing it to
Uh,
somebody. And that's not the final version. It's just the quickest thing you could do to get to the next stage, to get feedback on it. You can cut out, I see so many people hold off on presenting their roadmap because the roadmap isn't ready yet, right? They're waiting to get this version that's good to go. And I'm like, don't do that, right? If your roadmap is quite literally scraps a piece of paper, like problem one, two, three on a whiteboard, that's a great place to start because if you've got them in the wrong order, you'll know right away and you didn't have to pick colors or anything, right? You can do that later.
we're back to the sketch idea,
Yeah.
right? Sketch before prototype. What does the sketch of your roadmap look like?
Yeah.
And can you have a 15-minute conversation about that, or even a 5-minute conversation about that, that
Yeah.
saves you hours and hours of time later?
Yeah. Now, I see some tension in this as well because a lot of people think that in order to influence, they've got to look like they are the expert in it. And it's hard to look like an expert when you've made something out of crayons and post-it notes and you're just asking questions. You're not actually saying anything yet. How do you get the rest of your stakeholders on board with the fact that you're road mapping, it's a process of road mapping, and they're involved in it, and it's okay that this is scrappy and that it's not perfect yet?
So I think that really depends on your audience. I remember back in 2009 when I was a baby product manager at Cornerstone On Demand, I was tasked with being the first agile product manager. We used Rally and Excel, and I cannot forget having a conversation with one of the engineering leads who was not part of the agile transformation yet and actually
Mhm.
was the last team to ever be agile transformed 5 years later. And I was said to him, I want to be collaborative with you. Let's have a conversation about how we can build this. I don't want to deliver a I don't want to draw it out until I understand where things can be more complicated, where we can make things easier. And he said, give me spick.
Okay.
And to be clear, we're talking about a 150-page document spec. That's
Remember
what he was
those.
asking for rather than collaborating.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, similar to anything else, we have to influence that person to get bought into
Mhm.
our process, right? That's a shift for them. So,
Yeah.
luckily, a lot of people want to be part of the process. They don't want product to be a black box. And we have to say that to them. I know you've been frustrated that you think product makes decisions without your input, and I want to get your input.
Yeah.
Will you make 20 minutes for me to go through this with you? Right? That gets back to the positioning of the influence. And this is why influence is this layered approach and this
Mhm.
muscle you have to continuously be thinking about. Because what I just said to you was a captivate moment based on cultivating that I know the sales team is frustrated that they don't have enough input.
Yeah. Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
the sales leader knows that his team is frustrated that way. But it all goes again and again when you're having these cycles. And so we mentioned repeatable process. And so, what repeatable process doesn't have an acronym?
Go on, what's the acronym?
So, the acronym for influence that I created, and I'm sure there are other options, I call it MAP.
Map.
So,
Yep.
you map it out,
Yep.
map
Go
it
on.
out, right? So, MAP is M, manifest where you want to go. A, assess where they want to go.
Yep.
P, promote where you can go together. Like, where is that Venn diagram? Where is that shaded thing? And so
Manifest, assess,
yeah,
promote. Got it. Okay.
manifest, assess, promote, all
Yep.
about goals. Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And so manifest is the step where you deep dive into your vision of the future. And you remember that it isn't simply about the action you want someone to take, it's the downstream effects of those actions. What
Hmm.
ripples happen? Who gets affected? What value are we creating for all of these different groups? And the better you can design that picture, the more probable overlap is later. So then you learn about this other group, user development, customer development. We're assessing, we're learning, we're documenting. What does this other group need? And then when we choose to promote, which is that captivate step and the resonate step and all of those things, those are based on where is there an overlap? Where is there a mutually beneficial partnership opportunity in all the things I want to do and all the impacts it could have and what this person cares about? If I
Hmm.
can't find that, I'm never going to get them on board.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. So how do the people that you coach take to that? And how did their execs and stakeholders take to that? Is
Oh,
there tension that comes out when you start this process?
the tension that comes out is the realization that it's possible what you have planned doesn't actually help other people. And
Okay.
then you have to think back, why is that? Why was I only focused on my metric as opposed to a higher order metric? How do I
Right.
frame this into a KPI that's important to everybody, an OKR that's important to everybody? Because if I'm blinders on the adoption as a metric, but it doesn't actually drive revenue, is that the right thing?
Yeah.
Matt LeMay talks about impact first product teams. It's the same idea. If
Yep.
you're not having impact, there's a
Yeah.
problem. And so going through this exercise is a moment to say, what am I doing that has impact on the rest of the organization in a positive way? And
Yeah.
impact means helping them get closer to where they want to go, delivering value to other teams. And it gets back to customer research. You can deliver value to users, but not the customer. You can deliver value to the customer, but not the user. You can develop all of these things. And we know this, but we
Mm.
forget about it from an internal perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one thing that I see as senior product people start pulling together a process by which they outline, they pull in insights about where they need to go, what that's going to look like for the business. They get all these insights coming in, right? They're using the roadmap to influence, they're doing all the right stuff. And it starts hitting real tension points around the point where it shows vulnerabilities in the wider company. It
Yeah.
pulls out the things that aren't going to work, right? Because oftentimes the execs, a founder or somebody like that, will have this vision of where they're going to go with this. And it's one of those, something happens, question marks, profit, and they haven't really figured that out. And when they enlist the help of a team, a product person to help outline that, there's gaps. And
Yeah.
that becomes really difficult. And that's where they start getting that pushback, right? They've now got to not just influence about the way the roadmap is and what could be on it, but also sometimes change what the direction of the company is, what the vision
Yeah.
is,
And the
change how it's being
timeline of
measured,
what's possible.
and the timeline of what's possible. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the slice of what's possible, right? Have we validated that there's even this first step? I have this whole idea of kingdoms and expanding your kingdom and concentric circles.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to use that.
You and I can have a whole conversation about that and like
Yeah.
what you're allowed to expand to, where there's red and green.
Yeah.
But what you're reminding me of is there was a CPO I worked with. I ended up working with his team on influence skills as well. And it is the CPO's job to bridge that gap. Because
Yeah.
very often we have a visionary CEO and
Mhm.
they don't know how to communicate their vision in a way that is meaningful to everyone else and for
Yeah.
everyone else to know what to do. Whereas product is this hub and translator. So more often than not, the CPO becomes the right-hand person to the CEO in order to develop a cross-functional strategy
Yeah.
that will
Yeah.
get you closer to your end destination. And that's really hard. And when
Mm.
I expressed this to this person, their response to me was like, that's a lot of work, Tami. And I said, yeah,
Yes.
but it's the job. And when you invest the time in this instead of in your roadmap looking perfect and in
Yeah.
all of your downstream roadmaps being perfect and only focusing on the product strategy being good,
Yeah.
all of those other conversations that you're constantly having about why you're doing this and you're defending why this choice is being made, they
Yeah.
start going away because you've had alignment and agreement much
Yeah.
earlier on about the really important stuff.
Yeah, and this is why the job of the product manager is safe. A lot of people are worrying and fretting about where it's going with AI and stuff like that, right? If the job of a product manager was just to take a predefined vision, which was already known to be broken, to be able to be broken up into pieces and sliced down, that sort of stuff could be automated, right? The job and the problem is that oftentimes it looks like it's clear until you start looking at it and then it's not clear, and then you've got to get that clarity, right? That's the job right there. And if the job were easy, then somebody else would do it, right? If there weren't that tension, then it'd be something that we could pawn off on a junior person who doesn't know how to build influence and pull out that clarity. But that is the job, and that's why it's difficult. But one of the things that I always point out to people is when the job is difficult, yes, it might be difficult for you and your team to figure out. It's also going to be difficult for anybody else to figure out. It's not like your competitors all have this magical crystal ball picture of the vision future, and then they can build up from there. Oh, I see. I've
Well, we're
lost my train
talking
of
about
thought.
junior people, so we might as well talk
Yes.
about the real junior people.
Yeah, throw that in there. You're just so for everybody listening in, you're pulling up your book. What do product managers do? And you're talking about it's a children's book for
Yeah,
kids
I like to
to
say
help
illustrated
explain.
rhyming book. Illustrated
Illustrative
rhyming book.
rhyming book, I love it. About how to describe the role of a product manager. And I think we're just talking about some of the basics there. The job of the product manager is to get that clarity.
Yeah. And like I was showing the pictures of all the different people we work with.
I love it. That's
This
so
is the
sweet.
engineer with the
Yeah.
Stop Wars in the Star Wars logo font. The book is longer than most children's books, and that's because being a product manager is complicated.
Yeah.
And all of the nomenclature about what we talk about is complicated. And
Yeah.
all of the different people we have to work with is complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have simplified it into pictures. Don't get me wrong, there's a Minecraft page, whatnot, but it's still complicated.
And this is why it's so important that we talk about this stuff, right? Because I think it's too often that we read all the case studies in the books and whatnot, and they seem to have figured it out, right? They're just doing it. We hear about all the successful companies who started off here, this thing happened, this other thing happened, and now they're giant, right? And these are the things that we're often basing our assumptions on. And actually, what we're not really seeing are the people saying, actually, whoa, I got into this company and it looked like it was a good opportunity, but oh my God, the CEO is not clear on what they want. So now I have to do this thing. Is this normal? You're like, yeah, actually, that is the norm, right? That is the job. And that's why we're all still here. Because if it were just something that could just be articulated and written down once and everyone just goes and breaks it up in pieces and does it, we wouldn't have product managers, right? We wouldn't have things to do.
We wouldn't have product leaders, wouldn't
Yeah,
have engineering
exactly.
leaders, wouldn't have marketing managers, product marketing managers. Like it
Yeah.
takes a lot of people
Yeah.
on the ship to get things done.
And this is why it's so important to think about it as a repeatable process. You talked earlier on about this repeatable process of building influence, right? I think so often we spend so much time thinking about the process of building our products and iterating on our products themselves, but we don't think about the process by which we build a product management company, a company who can think in product management terms and build the thing that's most valuable for the market at that point in time, right?
I'm laughing because nowadays I promote influence and leadership and corporate training. But when I was dead centered focused on product leadership coaching, I wrote this article called Everything is a Product, Even You. A roadmap
Hmm.
is a product. Your
Yeah.
communication devices, your artifacts are products. They should be iterated on. You should get feedback on them. They should have a goal. Your meetings should have a goal. Your team is a product. What pieces are missing? What features are missing from your team dynamics? All of these things, if you put on the product mindset,
Yeah.
they're all there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into some of the things that get really tricky when this happens, right? Because I wanted to talk about how people are hard. People are the hardest part of our job, right? And oftentimes you'll get a difficult person. I think everybody in here is now currently thinking of the difficult person, right? The negative stakeholder. And you know that they're going to be difficult in the room. They're going to go, actually, and
They're
they'll
going to
then
dig their
say,
heels in.
wouldn't you agree that actually my opinion is this instead, right? And they take you off in a different direction. How do you handle that stakeholder who's going to be difficult before you get them in the room to be difficult?
So I think there's two parts of it. Number one is dealing with them, and number two is dealing with everyone else. So
Okay.
dealing with them, give them a one-on-one place to express their concerns. More often than not, they want to be heard. Yes,
Mm.
they like to be have their voice heard in larger audiences often, but more than anything, they want to be heard. And so hear them, respect them, possibly even make modifications based on them. And when you present, preemptively deal with their objection. So it's harder for them to raise their hand and object. So that's the them side of it.
Mm,
Then there is the social influence side of it, and what I like to call the electoral politics of product. And oh my God, it's 10 years ago, I was at Lean Agile Scotland and
yeah.
I went to a workshop. I was speaking, but I also went to a workshop with somebody who was a professional electoral politics person and a professional product manager. And they worked together to show about influence that electoral politics, they segment all of the potential voters. And you have your strong supporters over here and your strong opposition over here. And in between, you've got your swing.
Right.
And anybody who works in politics knows they don't invest time in the opposition. They spend time getting the swing to slide over and
Right.
getting the supporters to show up. And that works for us too. So I
Oh,
said two things. One, the person who's the opposition, and one is everyone else. So find your supporters in the everyone else. And that's part of mapping it out too when it comes to mapping out your influence. Map
yeah.
out all the people who need to agree and say, these people are supporters. And that doesn't mean you don't have to talk to them. You
Yeah.
do have to talk to them. Number one, you have to get them to show up and vote. In the corporate setting, that means showing up and expressing that they like your idea. Because the
Yeah.
more of them that show up and say, sales likes this, marketing likes this, blah, 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 likes this, then whoever is your naysayer, they feel like they're going to have to go up against everybody who sees the benefit. Again, back to that mapping it out. And also, there's the idea of like, here is my circle of influence. Everybody I've built trust with, everybody I've cultivated relationships with, everybody I understand, they understand me, and it's easier for me to influence. Every one of those groups has their own circle of influence. So everybody in the strong supporter group has relationships with people in the swing. And it
Hmm.
is impossible and exhausting if you tried to talk to everybody within the swing to get them on board.
Yep.
But if you can get some of your supporters to talk to their close relationships, it's chess.
Yes. Yes. And this is the sort of thing that becomes like a virtuous cycle, right? It's hard from a standstill, but if you start with one and you build up from there, the best way to get somebody on board with your ideas is to help them see that it's actually their ideas, right? They're
And
collaborating
gonna
on this
benefit
first version of the
them.
roadmap. And that goes back to your very first post-it note scribble roadmap, where you're just saying, hey, look, I'm hearing you out. I think we need to go here, then here, right? You're just mapping this out quickly. You're getting their input on that. So when you're looking at the wider picture of it, they're on board with it, right? You've got your first supporter just by talking about the bigger plan. You haven't had to make some roadmap and get them to rubber stamp it or anything like that. You're just getting people to talk through, pitch in their ideas at the broad brush picture, and then go from there.
And here's the extra benefit. You're showing them that you're thoughtful and not
Mm,
arbitrary.
yeah,
So often, when all we do is deliver the final result of the roadmap, we can't invest the time in showing people all of the thought process and decision making and trade off, all of the things like the weeks that have gone into making that thing happen.
yeah,
Whereas if you have those smaller conversations, you start building this relationship where they see you as someone who is thoughtful and not arbitrary, that you
yeah,
are logical, that you make decisions based on all of these things that are in your head that they may not be aware of. Because you mentioned, oh, yeah, the sales team mentioned this, and I looked at the customer service data, and we have a trend line of this issue. Whatever it is, you're showing them
yeah.
that when you make a choice about what's in or out, it is thoughtful and
And
that they
so
know you've done your homework.
yeah, no, that's a really good way of putting it. You just mentioned sales as well, because this is one of the, I'm not going to call them a negative stakeholder, but they can be a group that forces things on the roadmap that doesn't necessarily work for the product team. Let's say you've got buy-in, so this is where we're going with it, and then the sales team sells something that is not on the roadmap. How do you begin handling that, especially if it happens over and over again?
Okay. So I need everyone to understand that I spent my product career in the B2B selling to the enterprise space.
Yeah.
So this story is so common in that particular space that you're bringing up PTSD a little bit. And to me, that's actually more of an executive issue.
Okay.
That executive leadership
Hmm.
hasn't yet pulled in the reins on the sales team and said, we don't care about deals that are less than this number. We're not building anything for them,
Yeah.
or whatever that is. And also, per what you were saying earlier, do they have a clear vision about where the company is going?
Yeah.
And so I remember when I was at Cornerstone, which is software as a service, learning management, performance management. This was, let's give it 2009, 2010. The performance team, SaaS, had to build a tool that allowed for customers to download all of the performance review questions as an Excel workbook and could also upload the filled out workbook. Why
Hmm.
is a SaaS company taking 3 steps backwards and saying download as Excel and then upload?
Yeah.
And I turned to the CEO at some point and I was like, what is happening here?
Mm.
This is the most unsass thing we could possibly ever do. And
Yeah.
he said, we're meeting our customers where they are. We have consulting companies as customers, and they do performance reviews when they are flying back on Thursday evenings from their clients to home. And back then, planes didn't have Wi Fi.
Yeah.
And so these people, in order to adopt any sort of technology around this,
Yeah.
needed to be able to download Excel, fill it out, and then upload it when they landed. And he said, in order for us to change the way the world learns, in order for us to have people adopt technology, we have to do it this way. Because if we do it this way, this consulting firm will become a client, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And then once they're in, we can try to create more technological on screen things because technology of the world, Wi-Fi will start developing.
Yeah.
But let's get into their workflows first. And it
Nice.
was such a moment of, are we doing something for the money or are we doing something because it actually fits into our vision?
Yeah. And that right there was a great example of doing that customer discovery upwards, right? So going to your exec and saying, hey, I'm seeing this over here. What's the reasoning behind this? What are you trying to see? Because oftentimes your execs do have insight on something that they haven't articulated, right? They're
Yeah.
saying go this way, but they're not actually saying why and what the incentive is. Oftentimes when you see companies who are building for these individual enterprise customers and they're taking orders from sales, they start acting less like a product company and more like an agency, which in some companies, in some cases, might actually be disaster. But for some companies, it actually might be a tactic in order to.
To open up opportunities. I don't know, Jenna, if I got disconnected or you got
And
disconnected.
it's actually really important to dig down and figure out what those reasons are so that you can then start making decisions based on that or using that insight to then influence the next step, right? Because if they're pointing out things that don't make sense and you go, oh, but you haven't thought about this, this is going to trap us here, that's the sort of thing you can call out and you can influence upwards if you have the insight on what they're trying to do and what you're seeing from your corner as well.
Yeah. And so to a certain degree, like if in that situation, like I remember asking the team, who is this for? And them saying PricewaterhouseCoopers. If
Mm,
it's just associated with, hey, this is the PricewaterhouseCoopers contract, that's why we're doing it.
yeah,
That creates this environment of any client can sign a check and then we'll do it and we're an agency.
yeah.
But what needed to happen was a product person needed to step in and say, we're doing this because it fits within our vision. This is going to help us open these doors in this way. It isn't about the individual check, it has a much bigger purpose. And that, to a certain degree, is strategy deployment.
Yeah, and it's also going to help your storytelling, right? Because your job as a product manager is to then communicate this in ways that the rest of the team can then help work towards it, right? And so it helps you have good conversations with your sales team so that they don't go off piste and think, oh, we could sell that, so therefore we can sell this other thing. It helps your development
Definitely not.
team understand why you're focusing so much on this one particular client thing or why they're going off in this direction, right? So the storytelling isn't you making up stories, it's you pulling in those insights and spinning it based on what you're seeing from all these different angles, right? From the market, from the customers, from what's
Yeah.
technically possible, but also what the business needs as well.
Yeah, technically, if you're doing things simply because a customer said they'll pay you for it, your agency. But if you're doing it because this was on our roadmap anyways, and a customer is going to pay us to do it, so
Yeah.
we have extra revenue to do it. Like I was working on we didn't have a mobile app. So one of our customers was building a mobile app, and I
Nice.
had to create the first APIs for their mobile app to consume. But those were also the first APIs that were available for us to integrate with other systems.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we didn't have to build APIs,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but the customer was paying us to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I call that accelerating the roadmap, right? And
Yeah.
this is where judgment calls come in. And again, this is why product managers aren't going to be just replaced by some automated system, is because the reasoning why you might want to do one thing over the other, but depends. And it depends on so many different factors. And you need to play out what it might look like one direction or the other. And actually, oftentimes you open up different channels, different doors, not realizing, not knowing for sure which direction is going to take you, but you're the person who's going to identify this is what it should look like when we get there, right? This is how much we can
And you're going
give
to tell
toward
that
this.
story. You keep
Yeah.
saying storytelling.
Yeah.
Is an AI going to convince someone that this is the proper roadmap or this is the choices we made or why?
Yeah.
Definitely not. But the AI can help you. You can start inputting all these different people, all these different personas, what's important to them. It can even make assumptions for you about different teams and obviously validate assumptions for product people. But the nature of I have to customize my messaging at scale, AI is great at that.
Yeah.
I need to remember things from 3 years ago. AI is great at that. It
It
needs to
is. Yeah.
scan all of my emails and consolidate all of the feedback and the data, all of those things. AI powers your ability to story tell better, but you're
Yes.
still telling the story. You're
Yep.
still building the relationship. You're still cultivating those relationships. You're still saying something that captivates somebody.
Yeah.
You're still having that conversation with the naysayer and the supporters so that everyone gets on the same page as to why we're doing something and what we're doing.
And that's actually super important, right? Because I think a lot of people are leaning on AI in ways that are getting a bit dangerous in some ways, in that AI is great at telling a story, and oftentimes it's flubbing things or smoothing things over to create a narrative that sounds good. Now, it's those conversations with the naysayers, with the supporters, with everybody else, right? So you're synthesizing the stuff, you're getting this picture, but if you're not taking that out again and sense checking it, you're almost certainly missing stuff. You're glossing over pieces and you're going to end up running people in a direction that doesn't necessarily make sense. So
Yeah,
it's that checking, that bringing in those stories again, bringing in those insights again to then feed back in. And again, you can use AI to help adjust things and
yeah.
speed this process up, but it's those conversations that just aren't replaceable.
AI is a fantastic devil's advocate.
Yeah, it is.
Or, hey, be the compliance team. Tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
Tell me what's wrong from a regulatory perspective on what we're about to plan. You have unbelievable tools at your fingertips. Is it going to give you all the answers? No. But
Yeah.
is it going to give you a leg up? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Use anything to your advantage that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, for people who are thinking about how they're going to begin influencing a conversation tomorrow, is there an influencing technique that somebody could put together, should put to use in their next meeting tomorrow?
So the map it out framework you can use again and again,
Yeah,
manifest, assess, promote. If you need help remembering this, or you're like, yes, this is awesome. I want to share this with my team and I don't want them to watch a whole webinar. I'm going to share in a minute a link where you can download this double-sided worksheet. One side explains the map, assess, promote. One side actually creates an opportunity for you to do the manifest, the assessing, and the promoting. And because popular demand, customer research, people wanted an editable version of it. We created a Google Doc version that allows for you to just type it in, which means you could then import it into an AI or anything else you'd like. It's just a table, right? It's
perfect.
just a table. And so it's available to you to use as you wish, and you can then use it every day of your life, day after day. And I am sharing the very easy to find website, tamireiss.com/map for Map It Out. Tami Reiss is spelled Tamireiss. And go there And then you'll
Perfect.
also be on my email list and you'll hear lots of different ways to apply, influence, and otherwise.
Yeah.
But before we leave, I want people to recognize something really cool because we haven't talked about that. We have been highly focused on the work environment and how influence is useful in the work environment. This is one of very few skills. I'm not going to say it's the only skill, but we'll call it one of very few skills you can work on for work that will also help you at home. It will
Ooh.
help you with your children if you have them. It will help you with your partner. It will help you with your parents. And everybody has parents at some point, or grandparents, or whatever. And convincing your mother-in-law to come to Christmas at your house instead of hosting it can be done through influence, can be done through mapping out, assessing what they want, manifesting what you want, understanding your supporters, understanding the opposition, all of those skills. You can use them again and again. You can use them to negotiate for a car or try to get a discount on your hotel or try to get an upgrade on your plane ticket. All of these things are things that influence and are human advantages can be really strong. And
And
so
it,
think about it that way.
and it feels like this is the sort of thing that would be awkward to start for some people, right? But it's like this muscle where as you get better at just naturally figure exactly like you're working it out, you're figuring out how to understand these stakeholders, how to assess where they are, understand how to better communicate your own motivations just to yourself, and then how you're going to get out there and say something about it. And this is the sort of thing that could happen in very short cycles, but for big things, you might need to just map it out, put it out in that table. So thanks for sharing that link. I'm going
Yeah,
to take that and include that in our follow-up email as well, so that people have that link and
cool.
they don't miss it. So that sounds really valuable.
And from a mindset perspective, you just said stakeholders. My word for it is internal partners. And I say that because if we take the partnership mentality
Mm.
that we're all on this boat together, that we have to work together, that's where you're finding those overlaps for
I like
example.
that.
That's where
Internal
you're
partners.
creating these relationships where, hey, we're all trying for the business to be successful.
Yeah.
We may be taking a sales lens to it or a marketing lens or a customer success lens. All of those have different lenses of retention and revenue growth and expansion and blah, right? Risk aversion. All of us together want the business to be successful.
Yeah.
And so we're partners. And if we bring that mindset to the table as opposed to an adversarial, you're going to ask me for things and I'm going to say yes or no to something else, it changes the dynamic and in a very positive way. Just don't get taken
Yeah.
advantage of, okay? None of this
Great.
letting the sales team own your roadmap.
Okay. Amazing. All right. That's a great place to end it there. Some great advice to finish with. So thank you so much, Tammy. Before we go, I just want to say a very quick shout out to ProdPad. Tammy, you shouted out about ProdPad as well. So thank you so much. I know there's a bunch of people here who are already ProdPad users and supporters. So thank you very much. If you don't use ProdPad already, jump in and start a free trial. It's a space that allows you to capture all these insights about what it is that you're trying to build towards and who's saying what about it. And it helps you create that story, that defensible story, and then turn it into different versions of the roadmap that can then be shared out to the right stakeholders, get their feedback, iterate on it. It's like a living, breathing roadmap process tool that you can use. So jump in. It's free to try. We'd love to get your feedback on it. And on that note, it'd be very good to see people back here next time. We've got two more of these coming up. So we've got creating a product brain with agents and MCP with our head of product, Julie Hammers. That's going to be happening on September 8th, same time, same place. And then we're also going to be talking about the CPO's investment portfolio, where product should spend its next $1 million with Matt Little. That's going to be on September 29th. Again, same time, same place. So, huge thank you, Tammy, for joining us here today. And we look forward to, oh, I've got lots of follow-ups
So
here.
many
We
QR
don't need
codes.
here. There we go. I'll land on that one. And I just want to say huge thank you, Tammy, for sharing your insights, sharing your map process. And thank you everybody for jumping in on the chat and for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I know that I just made fun of so many QR codes. Please remember that both I and ProdPad have libraries worth of knowledge and resources available to solve the problems you have. And as much fun as it is to go to ChatGPT or Claude and have them solve your problem, it turns out there are people who have thought really long and hard and have very specialized experience in a particular area that are here to help.
Amazing. That's so good. Yes, absolutely. So thanks again, Tammy. Absolutely wonderful having this chat with you. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and see you back here for the next one.
Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks again. Bye for now.